If you call yourself a writer, you might have picked up on the fact that what you want from your audience differs from other writers. You might be focusing a lot on your prose, or you might be throwing in a lot of jokes, trying to make your readers laugh, or perhaps you research every last bit of writing advice so that nobody can say anything bad about your piece, ever. Well, on this channel we investigate these differences and many others like it using Jungian psychology. For those who haven't watched the introduction, Jungian psychology groups people's brain types roughly in 16 categories, so-called personality types. Everyone, including you, is born with one of these personality types and then grows and changes and develops into the unique human being that they are today. But whatever type you were born as is still very visible in your writing process and even your writing style. So today we'll have a look at one of these aspects: how your personality defines success. The 16 types are distributed in 4 quadras, 4 types per quadra. I call them explorers, the navigators, the strategists, and the cartographers. So now let's look at some of the fundamental needs the people in these quadras have. The first one is between the writers who want to impact their audience and be remembered, versus writers who want to reach a lot of people and see that their stories are being read. And I know it sounds fishy, like every writer wants to leave an impact and every writer wants to be read, and if you can get one, you'll also get the other, of course. But the way the brain works actually causes writers to strongly focus on one of these aspects only, which influences the way that they write. It influences what genres they pick when they start out writing, and even what stylistic methods they pick. So let's talk about the upper category first, writers who really want to leave a lasting impression on their audiences. These writers, which we call the impactors, generally try to give a good physical experience to the people in their lives in order to make sure that they will be remembered by them. They have a fundamental need to leave an impact in the world and in the minds of people. They want to leave their footprints all over the place. And what is a memory other than a physical alteration of somebody's mind? These writers always try to craft an impactful performance in order to make sure the audience remembers it. The story should give the audience a physical experience through a pleasing prose, pleasing flow, or suspenseful writing, especially suspenseful writing, but also dark humor, shocking imagery, and even offensive materials. Crime fiction, mystery, and thriller authors, as well as filmmakers, are mostly in those 2 quadras, because in film you can convey a lot more physical sensation to an audience. These people enjoy nothing more than sitting in a room with someone who watches their movie or reads their story and watching them have all sorts of reactions. Here I have a couple of audio clips from famous writers who are in those 2 quadras. Number 1 from Gong, who is in the strategist quadra. Listen to this.
And that's kind of like the world that I want to be creating. Like I don't want something that someone reads and they're like, oh wait, I love that, but now I'm going to forget about it in 2 hours. Like even if someone like didn't even really like this that much, like even if they rate it like 3 stars, but they're like, oh, I'm going to think about this for a while. Like I almost prefer that over like a 5-star and then you don't think about it like ever again.
And number 2 by Darren Aronofsky, which is a filmmaker from the Navigator quadra. Listen to this.
I said to him, Dad, all I want to do is make them boo or applaud. If they do nothing, I lose.
So as you can see, these people seem to have a natural need to leave an impact with their audiences. So now let's look at the other category, the opposite category, which are the writers who have a natural need to be chosen and read by as many people as possible for as long as possible, as many times as possible. So these people don't go around trying to leave a good impact with their performance as much as they try to be desirable. They always want to attract others, hoping to be chosen by people. I am definitely one of these, and I can tell you from experience that we like nothing more than people to come up to us and ask something like, do you want to do this activity with me? Do you want to play this game with me? That is exactly what gives me a really good feeling, right? Because then I feel like I'm being chosen, like I'm desirable. So for us, it's all about being desirable and being chosen. And that translates to our stories. We believe that our stories are only alive and breathing if they are being read. One writer I've interviewed from the Cartographer Quadra said this. One day, I got a random royalty check. I sold a single book to a random person online. To this day, I still think about that royalty. That person that saw my book online and was interested enough to put in his card info and pick my book out of all the books out there. You can't put a price on moments like that. It's the moments like that that make you smile. Now let's talk about the remaining two categories, respectability and appreciation. The people on the right, marked in red, are very aware of what people think, and they always try to get people to think very highly of them. They want to be able to walk into a room and everybody already knows how important they are. And how do you get such an awesome reputation? By creating an awesome achievement. The writers in these psychological quadras really want to be creating an important achievement that speaks for itself and tells people of the author's intelligence, knowledge, expertise, or moral character. This is why they often try to get traditionally published, because getting traditionally published is such an achievement. They're all about titles and awards and certifications and basically having solid proof of their value that convinces everybody else that they have value. These writers tend to be very focused on trying to make their stories as valuable and special and integral as possible. So it becomes this amazing achievement that speaks for itself. Like, for instance, they're terrified of the possibility that someone might say, this is not that special because it has been done before, right? And that's why they're trying to be original. They outsource their thinking to experts, which means if they hear an expert say, something like never use dialogue tags, then they go and purge every single dialogue tag from their manuscripts because they want to make sure that their story adheres to the highest possible standards. They try to use sophisticated and complicated methods and writing styles, often without having the necessary experience, just because they're impatient and they want to distinguish themselves and break ground and be called smart and a genius and so on. Now, I want to add that at some point, many of these writers settle for less, or rather they grow up, is a better way to say it, I think. And they start calling themselves entertainers and they only write to entertain or to entertain themselves, for instance. I consider myself one of these. But that is just our way of keeping ourselves humble, because deep in our hearts we still crave that recognition. All of us secretly want to create that super important achievement that makes everyone hold us in very high regard and shower us with awards. Here's a quote from a strategist I've interviewed. It's not supposed to make you feel anyway, it's just supposed to leave a lasting impression. I couldn't care less if people value what I write. I care about impacting them and changing their perspective. You can clearly see the impactor side of the strategist, but we can also see the respectability side, right? She doesn't care about how the audience feels, which would be the appreciation side. No, she cares about impacting them, and then she cares about changing their perspective. Because her story is supposed to convince them of some message, right? It is supposed to be this achievement that changes their thinking, their mindset. It changes their perspective, which then is also going to change their perspective on the author and increases the author's respectability. So this is a typical strategist answer, right? I don't care if they like it. What I care about is that it changes their perspective and increases my reputation. This is a need that we all have, but we would never admit it because nobody likes people who admit, or rather who are all about their reputation, right? So you often hear these people say that, no, I'm not all about reputation, because they don't want to have the reputation of being shallow and thin-skinned, right? So of course we would never admit that. So now let's talk about the category on the left, marked in blue, the appreciation quadras. These people are all about evoking emotions in their audiences. It's all about what the audience feels, which I admit is also something every writer relates to, but this category also deals with audience investment. The appreciation writers, they naturally lack a good deal of self-worth and self-appreciation. So they are those writers who will always suffer from imposter syndrome, for instance, where they go, I shouldn't be writing, and what am I even doing here writing this story? I'm a fraud, I shouldn't even be doing this, even though they've already published several books and sold millions of copies. These people will never lose imposter syndrome. It never goes away. Here's an example of how that looks like from Eoin Colfer, the writer of Artemis Fowl. He is a navigator.
And that still happens. I mean, I've written 30 books and I still think it's not going to be published. This is the one that they're going to finally say, okay, we let you have your way for the last few books because the Artemis books did well, but this is junk. You know, and I'm not just being self-deprecating. I genuinely believe that.
Because of their lack of self-appreciation, these types always try to get other people to appreciate them and be invested in them. As writers, these people naturally focus on trying to get the audiences invested in their characters and in their stories. So it's all about cultivating the reader's investment and getting the reader to value the characters, to value the story, and ultimately the author. And here I actually have a quote from a writer from my writing group, because in my writing group, everybody is a respectability writer, everybody, except for this one guy. We were writing a novel together. Everybody was writing a chapter a week, and like next week another person would write a chapter, and this person wrote the final chapter. And we were all giving him constructive criticism, and everybody basically said that the beginning wasn't really good. And I gave him the advice that he should expand on it. But he said in response, that is the part that nobody liked. So logically, shouldn't I reduce that part? Like, he didn't even fight for his own story. He doesn't have the back of his own story. He is not invested in his own writing. He is only invested in his own writing if the audience is invested. Appreciation writers usually focus on what people value, which means they focus on relationships. Relationships are all about how people feel about each other, and they are the perfect tool to get audiences invested. Some of these types in these quadras even make an art form out of breaking the hearts of their audiences, because big emotion leads to big investment, leads to big appreciation. And the respectability writers are really bad at investment. They actually have a lot of investment for their own stories, so they don't really care about what the audience is invested in, which puts them at a natural disadvantage, where they basically don't really understand how to get an audience invested in their characters and their stories. They often get surprised when they realize that the audiences actually don't really share their investments, right? They're always super invested in their story, and they think that, oh, this is gonna be so successful, and I can already see my future success, and I can already see me on Stephen Colbert talking about my novel and all that, right? We always overestimate ourselves. And the appreciation writers, they always underestimate themselves. This is already a really important piece of writing advice that you can take away from this. If you are one of the respectability writers, then you need to listen to Tyler Perry's advice, because he is a strategist and he has realized that the audience always has to come first. You always have to respect the audience to the highest degree. That's it for the topic of what you as a writer want from your audience. Before we finish, I want to say that after you've listened to my descriptions, there are various reasons for why you might relate to the wrong quadra. So I would recommend that you don't settle on a quadra just yet and wait for my other videos. There will probably be about 15 to 20 more videos just alone in this series, where we talk about many aspects of fiction writing in which writers can differ from each other based on their psyche. And at the end, we will have a lot of insight into how our brains work, and even a bunch of writing advice that's specific for your brain type. I hope I'll see you in the next video.